Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and you know what day it is today? May 4th. Star Wars Day. Get it? Because May 4th? May the Force? May the 4th? Ah, it's so good. It's not good at all. But we recently had the title for Episode 9 revealed. Rise of Skywalker. Along with a little trailer. But you know what? These Star Wars sequels are so pointless. I'm going to talk a little about it in this video, whilst the children next door scream. That's how mad they are. They're like 2 minutes years old, and they came out from the womb, and they were like, why are you making Star Wars sequels? And why are you making them so pointless? But you know, I enjoyed Star Wars a lot growing up. Empire Strikes Back was the first film I ever saw at the cinema, and not much has matched it in the 20 years since. Perhaps the biggest problem with the Star Wars sequels, the characters. Who went, oh, new Star Wars films are coming, I can't wait to see what new characters there are. Nobody was saying that. Go and find me like a post from 2014 or whatever of someone going, I'm so excited to see the new characters in the new Star Wars movie. Because, you know, that's obviously what people want from Star Wars. No, they weren't. Because I was excited for a new Star Wars film. A bit, I suppose. You know, I was looking at a lot of forums and message boards and places like that. People were saying, I can't wait to see Luke, Han, Leia, Chewbacca and so forth. Back when the prequels were coming out, you know what people were excited for? Hearing more about these events that had up to this point only been referenced. They were like, oh, maybe we'll hear more about the Clone Wars, we'll get to see a young Darth Vader, young Anakin Skywalker, young Obi-Wan and all this stuff. Backstories for characters that people were attached to. There's nothing wrong with making new characters. The issue here is that Star Wars is primarily the story of Anakin and Luke Skywalker. When you are making Episode 7, that was it, yeah, Episode 7, you don't make it about other things. When you're making an unrelated thing, then sure. Like when you're making Knights of the Old Republic, people don't buy Knights of the Old Republic expecting to see Luke Skywalker, you know? When you see Episode 7, a sequel to the Skywalker storyline, you expect to see Luke Skywalker. Sure, you know, there's the extended universe full of characters, but for these sequels, that was the main draw. New characters were... I mean, we needed some new characters, obviously, but to the extent they've done it, it was unnecessary. As were the sequels in general, because there was nothing more to say. What have we learned from the sequels that we didn't know from the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy? I know a lot of people don't like the prequels, and I fully understand the complaints raised to them, but they showed us and told us new things. This sequel trilogy is utterly pointless. If you wipe those movies out of existence, nothing is lost whatsoever. We haven't learned anything new about the setting or the characters. But if you are going to make the sequels, why would you squander the characters that people were excited for? As for the new characters, they are lacking. Kylo Ren is evil because... Why? Can you answer that question? No, you can't. The only possible answer you could have is, well, he's bad because Snoke tempted him to the dark side. Okay, sure. Why? How? Anakin was tempted to the dark side because he was offered the power to save his wife, and he'd had a very troubled upbringing. He was a slave for the first 10 years of his life, and then he went from being a slave to being indoctrinated, in a sense, into a religious order where they try and suppress your emotions. But what sort of temptations were there for Kylo Ren? He was just like, oh, I guess I'm an edgy teenager, and Snoke can smell me, and he's gonna be like, hey kid, do you wanna be evil? And Kylo was like, sure, I mean, I'm being raised by my uncle or whatever, who's like the most famous dude in the galaxy or whatever, but no, sure, I'll be tempted by your evilness, and then, oh no, Uncle Luke is trying to stab me in my sleep. What? They never go into it. They never say how Snoke tempted Kylo to the dark side, because there's nothing there. They didn't think about that. They just suddenly brought it up in The Last Jedi, when in Force Awakens, they probably had a completely different idea for his backstory. They're just making this all up as they go along, and it's so obvious and so poorly written. Still, he's not the worst of them. Kylo has some interesting moments. Finn was an interesting concept for a character that they did nothing with. We've never really had an Imperial defector before in such a large role. You might be able to count Han Solo, because in some ways he was working for the Imperials, if I remember correctly. I'm not like a Star Wars lore buff, but that was never really brought up at all. We've never had the perspective of an Imperial defector as a main character. Just about everything interesting you could do with Finn's character, they blew in the first 20-30 minutes of Force Awakens. The film starts, he's a stormtrooper. We see him in, like, presumably his first battle, and he's like, oh no, I guess we're arseholes, I don't want to do this anymore, look at all this blood on my hat. And then, like 10 minutes later, he's murdering all his prior associates. He's just sitting there in a TIE fighter like, yeah, blast them to bits, even though this was the reason I was upset, and like, what? And then after landing on Tatooine, everything since then, he's basically been like a Rey fanboy who hops about whilst the script tries to give him something to do. There was potential there. The writers did nothing with it. Finn's arc of leaving the Imperials should have been stretched over the whole first movie, if not the whole trilogy. You can't just have him suddenly go, I'm done. That was just really shoddy, and it was a huge wasted opportunity for his character. And frankly, I can't see them doing anything interesting with him now in Rise of Skywalker, because they blew it. You know what else they missed with Finn's character? They never have him adapting to life, the world outside of the First Order. He leaves, and then he's automatically like, he's like, oh yeah, I know everything that I would need to know, even though I've been brought up, presumably, in this extremely controlled environment where they're trying to sort of thought crime you, or whatever the First Order do. You going from that to the outside life would be kind of weird. Somehow, even the prequels did that better, with Anakin being a slave, and then when he's no longer a slave, he's like adapting to life in the galaxy, and things are new and different to him. But even then, Finn is not the worst, because that title goes to Rey. I know it's become a bit of a internet meme at this point where people go, Rey is a Mary Sue, and she's not a Mary Sue, you just hate women, and all that. But if you look at it objectively, factually, she is a Mary Sue. What is a Mary Sue? A character who shows up in an existing fiction and is immediately loved by everyone, has no flaws, or if they do have flaws, it's like when someone's asked in an interview, oh, what would you say your biggest flaw is? And the person says, I work too hard. I've spoken about Rey's Mary Sue-ness in any other video that I've spoken about these films, so I'm not going to dwell on it, because, that's just a fact. She is a Mary Sue. Even if you don't think she's a Mary Sue, let's take that out of the equation and roll with it. Answer me this then. What is Rey's motivation? She's diddling about on a desert planet. Remember Tatooine? And then she decides to go with Robert because why not? Remember the first movie, the first Star Wars movie? Like, as soon as we meet Luke, in his intro scene, we know his dreams. He wants adventure, he wants to join the Imperials or the Space Fleet. He wants to do things, Rey has no motivation. They kind of vaguely bring up, I guess I was ditched here, so I'm just gonna sit here until they come get me. Gee, that's like the most exciting backstory and motivation for a character I've ever seen. But yeah, then she decides to go with the robot because why not? And then she goes to find Luke because why? They never say. She just goes because they're like, hey, we just found out where Luke Skywalker is. Who should we send to go and find him? Oh, how about this brand new person who's been part of our organization for about a minute? Okay, she has an emotional connection with a character she's literally never interacted with before. What? Her motivation is non-existent. Can you even describe Rey as a character? I don't mean, what does she look like, or she is good at fighting. Describe her as a character. You can't, because she has no character, no personality. I don't even understand who is going to be self-inserting as her either, because, they've made a big deal about, oh, well, these new Star Wars movies are for, little girls. Little girls need strong characters and role models. That's fine. Sure, everyone needs a good role model. Is Rey a good role model? No. What sort of stuff does she promote as a character? It's, do everything by yourself, because everyone apart from you in the world is useless, and you are the best at everything immediately. Yeah, that's like a really good sort of lesson we should be teaching children. You know, like, humans throughout history have always been very isolated and doing things by ourselves. It's not like we tend to congregate. I mean, who wants to be social? That's like the silliest thing ever. Who wants to help each other? Nah, just do everything by yourself, because anything you try, you will immediately be perfect at, even if you've never done it before, and you don't need to try hard. You just need to do it, you know? The characters are nonsense, and that is the biggest failing of the Star Wars sequels. Another big problem is the rule of cool they are rolling here with. Things pop up without any logical reason or explanation behind them. Now, this is something the prequels were very guilty of, because I know, if I'm criticizing the sequels, people are gonna go, oh, but Alex, you're forgetting the prequels. I'm not forgetting the prequels, but those are done. Those were like 15 years ago or whatever, you know, there's no point talking about them now. The prequels also had the rule of cool thing. They were like, people like Jedi, right? Let's have 100 Jedi all show up and wiggle their light swords around. Their light swords, yes. But here's my favourite argument that people come up with. You're complaining about realism in a series with laser swords and planet-sized space stations. That is an argument so lacking, so stupid, that a potato with a charge running through it would understand why it's not a good argument. It's not about realism, it's about internal logic. The First Order has less resources than the Empire, and yet they are able to create a station that is substantially larger and more powerful than the second Death Star, which I'm pretty sure they make a point of saying in the movies, or if they don't, maybe I imagined it, but the second Death Star was even bigger than the original. They made these giant things as a symbol of power, because it's like, oh, we want to rebel against the Empire? Maybe we won't do that, because they have a planet-sized space station that can blow up our entire, like, planet. Maybe we won't rebel. Speaking of, did you know, there is one line of dialogue they could have included to fix the whole problem with Starkiller Base. You could have literally had Rey overhear a stormtrooper in the background saying something along the lines of, isn't it fortunate that we discovered this ancient weapon from which the Death Star had its designs based, or something like that. With one line of dialogue, you fix that whole situation where they didn't build it, they found it. That's so much better. Then we have the fact that laser beams going across the galaxy are somehow visible going through the sky, like instantly. Everyone is just able to look up and see it. That's not how light works. Like, the light from the sun doesn't reach us instantly. I mean, even like a 10-year-old would know that, surely? Oh, you're nitpicking, Alex. Next up, you're going to complain about the Hyper Ram. And you know it, baby. The Hyperspace Ram was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Why would you make a Starkiller Base and a Death Star when you can attach a hyperdrive to a giant turd and ram it through planets to vaporize them? Was Purple Hair Lady the first character in the history of this galaxy to consider ramming into someone? And then, I guess, never do that again, because reasons. So much of these sequels is done purely to look cool in the moment without any logical reason as to why it's happening or how it's happening. Things are just put in because, hey, remember this thing? Yeah, I do. I can still watch the movies they are from. It's very, very clever on Disney's part. See, when the new trailer came out, I was watching it just because it came out and I wasn't doing anything at the moment. I had absolutely zero interest because Last Jedi killed my interest in Star Wars. Force Awakens was like, I thought it was a really bland movie. It was made fine, and I was like, okay, they want to start off real safe. They just want to get us, you know, back into this universe after like 20 years or whatever. Sure. Didn't really care for it, but let's see where it goes. Then we have The Last Jedi, and it's like they went, let's just do really stupid stuff for no reason. So I'm watching this new trailer, and I'm like, I don't care about anything that is happening here. Nothing is catching my interest. Then they brought Palpatine back in the trailer, and you know what? I was like, oh, that's interesting. Is it dumb? Most likely. Will it end up being bait and switch or a red herring? Is he going to be a flashback or like a recording? Is Rey going to... I mean, the Death Star is in the trailer for some reason, looking a lot smaller for some reason, because if I'm not mistaken, that thing in the Death Star they were seeing, wasn't that like way bigger? But okay, whatever, that's fine. Maybe it's like a prototype Death Star, maybe it's a butthole, who knows. Either way, maybe Rey's going to go there and find a recording of the Empire and be like, oh no, this sucks. But I don't know, is he going to come back to life? How is this gonna work? I don't think there's any way they can do this and make it good. If he comes back to life, that just undermines Return of the Jedi. If it's just a recording, then that's a really stupid bait and switch. But if they do bring him back to life, as stupid as it is, at least it will probably be entertaining. Because if not for that Palpatine thing, I would have had zero motivation to look at even what happens in the movie. I wouldn't even want to read it on Wikipedia because I would care that little. But now, I'm vaguely curious. I want to see what they're doing with Palpatine. It's like a desperation move because they realise people don't care about Rey or any of these non-characters. People care about the characters from the older movies because they had understandable motivations, they were entertaining, they had drive and personality. Palpatine is a fun villain. We know what he wants. Snoke, he's big, bad, sad man who has no motivation, no backstory, no nothing. Oh, and I know what you're thinking. Palpatine didn't have any of that in the original movies. You know what else is true? Vader is the antagonist of the original movies. We are introduced to him immediately. Palpatine doesn't show up in the first movie. He's in the second movie as a hologram for like a minute. And he's in the third movie, not really to be the main villain, but he's there to bring Luke and Anakin together as a happy family by throwing an old man down an elevator shaft, which isn't an elevator shaft, but whatever. Vader is the antagonist of the original movies. We are introduced to him before Luke. Palpatine is just the looming threat. He's a narrative device for Vader's eventual redemption. It is in the prequels where his backstory comes to life. He is in the first movie, second movie, third movie. He's introduced in the first movie pretty early on. His motivations, all that, everything about him is fleshed out in the prequels, because that's where he plays the primary antagonistic role. It's just distressing, frankly. Star Wars has gone from one man's vision of adventure and a callback to all those old film serials from the, like, 40s and whatever, to a boardroom's vision of money. Don't get me wrong, George Lucas did plenty of wacky things. Prequels had a lot of problems with them, even the original trilogy. There are things I can point out that are dumb in them, but I would take them. I would take the prequels over the sequels any day. And don't mistake me on this either. If we're talking from a production standpoint, the sequels are fine, they're good. They are well put together movies. A car that's being mass produced in a factory by robots is well put together as well though, you know? Mass producing Star Wars, not a good idea. Disney were greedy. Oh, so greedy. The idea of a sequel trilogy could work. The idea of anthology movies could have worked. But you have to pace it. Spread the trilogy out over a decade. And then wait a few years before making any anthology stuff. Don't give us episode 7, and then a non-related movie. Then episode 8, then, you know, you can't just spam Star Wars at us. That's not how it works. Goodness me, Rogue One? No, you turd. Who on earth cares about how the Death Star was made to that extent? And you know what? We already had a story that involved them getting the plans for the Death Stars with a very popular character amongst fans. And it wasn't the whole focus of Kyle Katarn. It wasn't 100% we must get Death Star plans, but it's, you know, it mentioned how they got the Death Star plans. Here's the delicate thing about Star Wars. People love the main characters. People love some of the extended universe. But don't mesh the two into some sort of abomination where you tease Luke and then don't do anything with him. If you want to tell a new story, tell a new story. Look at Knights of the Old Republic. Very popular and successful story. I have no respect for these half measures. If you took the sequels and made them unrelated Star Wars movies, they would be a lot better. If you had Rey, Finn, Kylo as characters in their own Star Wars thing, nothing to do with the main films, you know, like Knights of the Old Republic for example, that would be a lot better. People love Knights of the Old Republic. Modern Star Wars is a joke, and that is sad. But hey, happy May 4th to you. Maybe that new Star Wars game will be good. The game they announced with no gameplay shown. But the premise of it, sure, I'm interested in the premise. If there's one thing I would request or want from this game, it's for lightsabers to not be clubs. Battering people with a laser-sharp sword as if it's a wooden club is so stupid, and I hated it in Force Awakens, Force Unleashed, whatever that thing was called. It's so stupid. It's so stupid that I'm going to go to sleep right now. Bye.